Hi, friends, and welcome to Season 3 of the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, often known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I'm an old dog who's always trying to learn new tricks. That's why in each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson, program, or activity they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. Speaking of which, I'd love to hear about what you and your friends are doing in your school library. Email me at drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com to tell me about what you're doing, offer feedback about the SLLN podcast, or to request a podcast sticker. As Amy Herman likes to say, being a guest on a podcast is a great way to show your admins you are engaged in meaningful professional development and leadership in the profession. So drop me a line and let's chat. That being said, the opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. I just like to geek out about school libraries. So without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, we're back, and this time we're doing something a little different. I got two guests, so this is going to be twice as much fun. I love it. So before I get too far ahead of myself, let me pause and say welcome, Monisha. Welcome, Deborah. I'm so glad you can be here. Why don't you take a second and introduce yourselves? Tell us who you are, where you're at, what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Monisha Blair. Thank you so much for having us, Steve. I am the head librarian at Key Middle School in Springfield, Virginia, which is in Fairfax County, and I have the best job in the world.
My name is Deborah Sran, and I work at John Lewis High School, which is the high school that Monisha's students come to after they graduate from Key Middle School. And I'm the John Lewis Leadership Program Manager, which means, in short, that I get to create the conditions so that every student at John Lewis High School has the chance to create the change they want to see in the world.
I love school librarianship, but that does sound pretty darn good. Man, so that's interesting. I did not realize at first that you were not both school librarians. So that's an interesting sort of combination that you guys have going on here. And I usually ask, how did you end up in the school library? But that doesn't really apply to Deborah. But Monisha, I am kind of curious. What led you into the school library? Like, how did you get there in the first place?
So this is not my first take on things. I started out as a reporter. I worked in marketing and advertising, did a stint as a stay-at-home mom, and then I started volunteering at my local public library, and I loved it. I was working with the 0 to 2-year-olds, and I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I went to library school, also a fellow Rutgers alum, and I was like, I know I want to work with kids, but I want to be at a public library. And my mentor, Dr. Joyce Walenza, who is amazing, convinced me that I should keep the door open to school librarianship. She's like, you want to work with kids. Don't make yourself go back and get a teaching certificate if you don't already have one. So I did, and we ended up moving out of New Jersey down to Virginia towards the end of my program. And really, the small local public libraries that we had in New Jersey aren't as much a thing in Northern Virginia. We have these large library systems. And so I found myself at a school, and the school that I have now is great. I serve about 650 middle schoolers and about 45 students with global disabilities, and I could not find a better school community.
That's outstanding. Wow. Man, you have really had quite a journey. That's awesome. Now, Deborah, I know you're not a school librarian, but how did you end up where you are? Like, I've never even heard of a thing like this before.
I started as a high school English teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools. And when an opportunity came up to join as what back then was called the culturally responsive pedagogy specialist in central office, basically to address issues of bias and representation in our curriculum and in our instruction. When that opportunity came up, it was really challenging for me to think about leaving the classroom. The impact that an individual teacher makes in the classroom, there's really nothing like it. My mom was an English teacher. My grandfather was an English teacher. But I did decide to make that transition to work at the division level. I did that for a few years, and it was really impactful. I learned so much from our community members about the ways in which our social studies curriculum in particular, that was my area of focus, creates opportunities for students to see themselves in our past and present and future, but also sometimes erase erases or misrepresents our past, present, and future in ways that really harm our students. And so I learned a great deal, and I missed working directly with students. And so, 5 years ago, this opportunity became possible at John Lewis High School. Our school was renamed to honor Congressman Lewis. We are the first school to be renamed to honor Congressman Lewis. I think we might still
Very
be
nice.
the only high school named for John Lewis in the country. I'm not sure if that's still true, but it was back in 2020. And so our students, our families, our community members advocated not just to change the name of the school, but really to remake the school in connection with John Lewis, to create opportunities for students to connect to John Lewis's leadership legacy as part of their ordinary high school day. And so this position was just about working with our students, our staff, and our families to create the Lewis Leadership Program. It was nothing when we started together, and we centered the voices of our students and just tried to build something that's really meaningful and tailored to the individual interests of the young people that we're fortunate enough to serve.
That is amazing. Boy.
And the program started in the library, I have to say.
Really?
Our first office was, in a kind of office on the side of the library. And we were so fortunate. I joined Lewis High School not knowing anybody. And so the only classroom available, was the space inside of the library. And that was the best accident that could have happened in my first year, because it meant, I came to quickly understand the library at Lewis High School is just unparalleled. I'm so in awe of Mimi Marquet and Kelly Burke, who lead the library here. But it's a whole school classroom. It's a center of innovation and reflection and inquiry. And so just because I was fortunate enough to have a classroom space there, I was able to connect with students and staff who might not otherwise have wandered in. So it became the foundation of the program. And it's still that way. We celebrate all our big events in the library, and the library is, are one of our most important partners at the school.
Man, well, libraries are magical places. So
yes,
I was going to say, and Mimi and Kelly really are collaborative partners in the work.
That's awesome. Well, we need to talk about the work. So we are here to talk about, you guys have put together a traveling library project, activity, program, amazing thing. And I saw Monisha share about this on Blue Sky, and I was just so in awe of what I was seeing online. And so I am just so curious. Let's maybe start with, where did this idea originally come from?
Should I start, Monisha, or should you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the idea came from our students at Lewis High School. Our students, since I've been here the past 4 years, every year, the projects, the ideas that our students come up with, the ways that they want to create change, they vary. They're a reflection of the individuality, the experiences and needs and hopes of each individual student. But there are certain themes that, are pretty constant. And one that comes up every year is just our stories matter. The stories of our community, the stories of our young people, they not only matter, but they deserve space to be preserved, to be shared, to be accessible to members of our community beyond the school walls. And so our students have had a real interest over the past 4 years of the program in, finding innovative ways to tell and share stories of our community that could inspire a reframing of what it means to, be a Lewis High School student, to be in our community. So that was really the impetus. The early grain for this project is just like, how can we as young people author a new story of our school and our community? The Lewis Leadership Program has these 4 concepts: leadership, justice, service, and advocacy. And service has been a big part of how our young people are, I think, just reshaping what it means to be a change maker, to be a young change maker, and to be the kind of leader who serves, who listens, who collaborates, and who maybe is not always the one with the microphone out front on the podium, but is coming alongside the community, understanding its authentic needs and partnering with community members to address problems. One of our organization partners in the Lewis Leadership Program is the National Museum and Center for Service, and they've got this great initiative. They're asking libraries and schools and organizations and businesses and universities to create small local museums of service. Just as you would walk into your neighborhood high school and maybe see a trophy case celebrating our athletic accomplishments, what would it look like to walk into a high school and see space that celebrates all of the young people and adults who help, who serve? And what would it look like if, for our nation's 250th anniversary, all of our community organizations had a prominent place where we tell the place of service in our nation's past, but also in our nation's future? So our community partner, National Museum and Center for Service, shared this idea with our students, and they put their own spin on it right away. And so they really wanted to focus on young people, how young people serve, all of the different ways that young people could serve, but also not to have a static museum, but to build something that could travel. So our students have really, over the past 4 years, rethought how our high school students could be leaders and change makers and supporters in our pyramid schools. And I'm going to turn it over to Monisha for this next bit because I'm so fortunate to know Monisha for so many different reasons. But pertinent to this story, I'll tell you lots of other stories if you let me. But pertinent to this story is that Monisha has been a really innovative thought partner in rethinking how Lewis High School and Key Middle School, we're of the same community. We're literally down the block, right? But bridging that divide across our schools is not easy. There's a lot of red tape. There are a lot of barriers, and there are a lot of reasons not to try. But the things that we've been able to do with Monisha, I think middle school can be a really transitory time and a difficult time. And I really think the work that Monisha is doing in connecting Lewis High School and Key Middle School, it's not only changing the game for your students, Monisha, and I hope it is, but very much so for my students every time they get the chance to go to your schools. I don't know if you wanted to share, once we built our museum, we really needed an audience.
So before we get to that, I want to say I feel the same way for everything that Deborah has said. And while she is the mother of the Lewis Leadership Program, I have been a proud auntie for the past 4 years, along for the ride. And I just want to call to this idea of servant leadership. It's not new by any means, but I do think that the work that's happening in the Lewis Leadership Program is redefining what leadership means. And it's not coming from the adults, it's coming from the students who feel empowered, who feel like they have agency. And I think that this museum is really a testament to that. And it's a visual representation for our community and outwardly of what that looks like. Because they're doing the work in so many different ways to lead.
That is so amazing. It's just, it's every time you talk about, oh yeah, and the students came up with the idea to do this, and the students said we should do that. My mind is just blown because I work in a middle school, high school complex. I only work with the middle school students, but I interact with the high school students sometimes. And I am just trying to even fathom them taking this kind of forward approach to, being engaged and involved. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
So speaking to that bridge, right? So I only see students for 2 years in my building. I've got 7th and 8th graders, right? And then they leave me for Lewis High School and they become big kids and they do amazing things and they stop messing with each other in the hallways in quite the same way, I should hope, right? Our brains have developed, those nooks and crannies get a little deeper, we hope. But anytime I get a chance to either go over myself or take some middle school students over to Lewis High School, I am such a proud librarian auntie over there to see how the kids have grown and their thinking has grown and what they are able to do it just makes me so proud.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because so often, especially for people who are outside of education, I don't think people get what a huge gulf there is between middle school and elementary and middle school and high school. And it's part of its maturation, but there's also just cultural differences in our types of schools that I don't think a lot of people get. So I am completely on board with you as you're saying, you're seeing just a whole different world with these kids when they get into the high school. Because I've 20 something years now in middle school, when they come back as high schoolers and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not, throwing kids in lockers anymore. Oh, okay, good. That's a good thing.
But yes, so when the student said, hey, we want to have this museum, I have a decently sized library. I have space. So if I can help facilitate a space to give them an audience, I want to do that. So
yeah.
I kind of said yes and then asked for permission.
Sometimes that's how you got to do it.
And then it was a process, right? So first, sort of one of the students who took the lead on this came over with a mentor who is an engineer and an educator to sort of think about physically, what does this look like? What does the build out look like? And it evolved from there.
So our students had come up with this idea that they wanted to gather our community stories of service and build this museum to honor all the different ways that young people have made our community a better place. And, this was a big, inspiring idea. There was a lot of energy in the classroom, but it really was, I want to shout out Trinaya, our 12th grade student leader. She's been in the Lewis Leadership Program for 3 years, and she really latched onto this idea as an opportunity for her long-term project for, the class that it's Lewis Leadership Lab as the class, right? And so you get to choose one project to really focus in on, and she really made this her project. She gathered a team. So shout out to Nathan, shout out to Bradley. And we were fortunate enough to connect with Patrick Rogan, who is a professional museum exhibit designer. He Zoomed with them, and he really facilitated this brainstorming session. I think we used like 120 index cards. The students wrote down, single words on each card of like, what do you want people to feel when they come to the exhibit? What do you want them to think about? What are some words that come to your mind when you think about service? And he helped them kind of like mind map it and imagine all the different interactives. And he also shared some really powerful examples of museums that he had helped create. And through all of this, the students were using large Post-it paper and like documenting their ideas of what this museum could be. They honed in on a few key concepts, that they wanted to help viewers make connections between service and some key concepts that came alive for these student leaders in connection with service. So service is joy, service is connection, service is growth, service is culture and identity.
That's amazing that they are
there's a fifth
going to
one.
those places, but even there is just amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So they identify these key concepts. They've got some ideas of what they want people to feel, but the museum really doesn't have shape yet. And so it was at that point that the students began thinking about, well, physically, what could this look like? And as a result of this, we built kind of this prototype. Well, I didn't. I just sat back and watched. My students built this prototype. And then, their hope was for it to travel. And that is, they always are looking for an authentic audience, and for them, how can we connect with our community beyond the school walls? That is often an aspiration for our students, but it really takes an adult who is supportive, who's willing to go and take a risk and ask for forgiveness and not permission and, remove the barriers. Trinaya walked down the street with a mentor and Monisha happily hosted Trinaya and was like, what's your idea? And I think Trinaya had like a wild idea, right? It was like really out there at first.
So it was a brainstorming session. Like we talked through so many different ideas. She had this amazing idea to like have a tunnel entrance as you walk in. It sets the mindset before you enter. And I'm like, that's amazing. Now, we can't build a structure beyond the doors because that doesn't meet the fire code. And like, I had to be this like naysayer in a way that like I hate, but also is a reality.
Yeah.
My space is going to look different than the next space that this is going to travel to. So are you going to have space to do a build out in quite that same way? What could this look like to still set an intention? How can we replicate that? So
that's amazing.
A lot of brainstorming, a lot of just questions.
And I keep my brain keeps getting stuck on the students are the ones who decided they wanted this to be a traveling museum. That is just taking it to such a whole other level. Like it's just amazing to me. And so, okay, so they are the ones who actually are figuring out how do we make this work? That's awesome. You got a professional museum designer to talk to the students. Incredible. I mean, this is so just mind blowing. So, okay. So we're starting to figure out like what this might look like. Where did they kind of go next? Like you've got your coterie of folks who are really on board with this.
I just want to add in that as it travels, their idea was also for it to grow. It was not going to be static.
Yes. When they decided they wanted the museum to travel, that was when they knew they needed to walk down that street, connect with Monisha, and try to really imagine what shape this could take. And so I got to see Trinaya walking down the block. I saw her leave Lewis High School full of energy, enthusiasm, ideas. And I saw her walking back really, to me, like focused, right? Like it was like, it went from like, oh my gosh, I'm super excited to like, I have a plan, right? And I do think, I know Monisha called herself a naysayer, but it's more like providing the design constraints that allow this idea that Trinaya has in her mind to actually take shape in the realistic context of Key Middle School, right? And so she came back with purpose. She came back ready to write down these ideas of like, how are we going to refine it? And so fortunately, because the project is anchored to a class, we were able to set up a cadence of workshops that Trinaya participated in and then began to lead in building out this museum. And more students got involved. So it's a bilingual museum. And so it was really important to us. We are a bilingual school. Well, we're a multilingual school, but our Lewis Leadership Program is a bilingual program in Spanish and English. And so as our museum travels, we wanted our community to be able to connect with it. And so our student leaders were able to produce exhibits in both languages, to really do significant community outreach, figuring out whose stories are we including, right? Who needs to be represented in this museum? And that was when, as Monisha, importantly brought up this point, which is what's the point of having this museum travel our community in a one-sided way, right? What's the point of creating a museum that is a static story that's going to move throughout our community? What if the traveling is an opportunity for our community to add to enhance, to participate in the narrative of service in our community? And so when it went to Key Middle School, we got to see the ways in which first the 8th grade and then 7th grade students interacted with the museum. I really loved it. I don't know what stood out to you, Monisha, and like the ways that your students connected with it.
So many things. It's also important to note, I think, that the reason that the program is bilingual is not like an immersion program. It's because just under 2/3 of our student population is Spanish speaking. So this is the language of our community.
Yeah.
So that's why it's reflected in the museum, because this is about our community. To that point, that's what the kids connected to. The first thing they looked at were the pictures. Well, I see my brother. I see my cousin. The number of times I heard those phrases over the 2 weeks that we hosted this museum made me go, they see themselves. They see their families. They see their community in this museum. And then the librarian in me saw the curiosity come through next.
Yeah.
What does service mean? What is happening in our community? And a little bit, we got there towards the end, but how can I then serve my community? Right.
That's amazing.
Which is harder the younger the kids are sometimes to see themselves as active participants.
Yeah. And not even being able to see themselves, but even having opportunities. Like there's oftentimes not opportunities for younger people to necessarily engage in servant leadership. And so this is amazing. I mean, anytime we can get our students to see themselves in our schools is incredibly important, and that they are not just seeing themselves in a metaphorical sense, but they are literally seeing their families in these exhibits. Boy, talk about just I'm at a loss for words. I can't even, it's so incredible that they are getting this opportunity. And so I want to backtrack for a second. Deborah, when the students were making the exhibits, like what were they making? What was that process? And then Monisha, I'm going to ask you how the middle schoolers added their bits, but I want to try and see like, what were they starting with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the students envisioned a physical museum and a website. And so there is a digital space, and the benefit of that is that it's limitless in terms of how large that archive can grow. And they are hoping that they're creating a legacy project, one that when they graduate, they can still check in on the website or come back to Lewis, and students will continue to add to this narrative of service in our community. We started with the physical museum, and some of it is just panels. They really liked the idea of these like kind of 6-foot retractable banners. Canva lets you design and print them pretty easily. So like I have no design background whatsoever, and I was able to mentor the students in creating something that I think looks pretty beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures I saw, I honestly did not understand that those were something that you guys had produced. Like, I thought that you had a professional museum coming in with these panels. They are amazing.
Why, thank you. I wish I could take credit. Yeah, the students, Patrick Rogan had helped the students kind of imagine what the components of a museum could be if they wanted it to travel. And then he also, the National Museum and Center for Service, if you go to their website, they've got these free resources. And some of them are about museum panel design, different formats. And Patrick was kind enough to give us feedback on our early drafts. And so he helped us think about, like, for an adult of average height or an adult who's in a wheelchair, like, where will their eye go on your, and so like there was a lot of design, like there was a lot going into the intentionality of like how the students placed the photos and everything. It was really cool. I learned so much. So there are those panels. And then there are also, the students knew that they wanted to honor individuals and groups in our communities. So there are these like kind of, we have a printer that prints 11 by 17. So that's like a really good size for us. Like it's big enough where it feels special, but it's still free for us to print. So we made a template for, individuals or groups that the students wanted to honor. And then the students, just as we were coming up with ideas, we realized that like we are too small of a group to determine who we are going to honor. And so we worked on establishing a committee of staff and students and community partners who could help us identify, our first 10 individuals and groups who make a positive difference, who give of themselves, generously to the Lewis community. But there's a nomination process that the students created. So now as the museum travels and you're looking at the museum, you're like, oh, my English teacher should be in this museum, or my aunt should be in this museum. And that's been really, really cool. So there's the panels, the honorees, and then this we learned from going to Key Middle School. But we quickly realized, and we should have known it all along, like kids don't want to just come and read words off of a panel. Like they just don't. And the photos are great, but they can only hold your attention for so long. So like, what about the tactile component, or what about the 3D component? So we started asking ourselves, like, what are the objects that could tell a story of service, and objects that we wouldn't mind putting in the trunk of my car, driving over to the elementary school.
And having hundreds of middle schoolers touch.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And thank you for letting them. That's another thing. That is another thing I love about libraries. Like, I think, when we talk about engagement in learning, like engagement is a whole body experience, I think, in my opinion, right? And so like, what are the places where students can freely move and pause and touch and like talk to a friend and decide their own pace of moving through a space, and like inquire in a way that allows for the kind of freedom and curiosity that I think real engagement and learning demand. And so unfortunately most of our classrooms just physically don't provide that kind of a space. So once we knew that Monisha was up for hosting it in the library, we knew that we could design a museum exhibit that really does center students' freedom to move and inquire and wonder.
That's awesome.
The space that we ended up using in my library used to be the computer lab that has not had desktop computers since we went 1-to-1 over 6 years ago now. And so I use that space for gallery walks and things like that all the time because it's got a good flow that way. Actually, just set up for classes on Monday that are going to do a gallery walk. And I've had museum exhibits in there before. And I will tell you that not every museum exhibit gets the level of engagement that this one did. So, no shade to the Smithsonian traveling trunks, but when you can see yourself in a museum, it means more.
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to talk about your experience with other traveling museums. But for now, so you've got these high school students coming over, and I'm kind of curious, Monisha, as you're seeing this go down, as what was it like? Like the doors open, the high school students come in, and what happened?
So I only got one student and one engineer at a time to walk through, and we were talking about how this was going to get set up, right? And then in terms of the actual setup, that was Deborah and I, because the students have classes.
Gotcha. Okay. Totally makes sense.
But we got a chance to, they figured out what was coming to Key Middle School. They got to say, what realia was going to be with this museum in addition to the panels. So Deborah and I did the actual setup, lots of tape, because things get touched a lot, as we mentioned. And so if I want things to not move away from the museum, we have to tape them down.
Things that I did not realize were part of museum practice. This is good to know. Okay.
Well, it's part of middle school practice. Then we invited the entire 8th grade in starting the next day.
Was it
right? We had a day of setup. Am I remembering that correctly, Deborah? Okay.
Was it all the eighth graders at once, or was it sort of like classes coming down, or?
So I partnered with our civics team.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
we did this every class period, once or twice a class period, to have students come through. We have roughly 20 sections of civics.
Wow.
Yes.
Monisha's being modest. I just have to say, Monisha partnered with the civics team and built out a master schedule that allowed for every eighth grader and eventually every student in the building, not only to visit it, but then Monisha built out a graphic organizer that asked open-ended questions for students to make personal connections to what they were seeing. So it was a really meaningful learning experience. And then she gathered the data from, some of the questions were like, what is an issue in our community? Because service is about our strengths and also our needs, right? So she asked questions about, from your perspective, what are some of the needs in our community? She tabulated the data. And so we have this incredible infographic that represents the perspectives of almost every key middle school student on our community's strengths and needs. And I really would love for you also to talk about the partnership with Key Center. And it was the first contribution we got to the museum because of you. So thank you.
So Deborah and I hosted a little lunch and learn at Key, which Key Middle is attached to Key Center. So we're one building.
Okay.
But they're two separate schools, and I serve both.
Okay.
So one library. So we didn't get a ton of attendance at this lunch and learn, but the biggest contribution that I think Key as a whole could have added was what our Key Center students came up with. So they chose to honor Judy Heumann, who is a disability rights activist, and they asked me to buy a couple of books on her. I was happy to do it. And they researched Judy Heumann. They came up with a trifold and some reading material for museum visitors to look at. And it was great. And the fact that it was student research from a population who is othered in so many ways was fantastic in and of itself. Like, if my middle schoolers had done this, I would have been just as proud. And it was something that the kids connected to. A lot of the kids said that serving people with disabilities was an issue that our community needs to address. And I had our Key Center kiddos, who are various ages 5 to 21, come through and experience the museum as well. So they were not filling out that same graphic organizer. They had a bingo board that our educational technology specialist over at Key Center created. Beth is amazing. And she knew what the kids would connect to. And they had their bingo markers, and they were finding the things that spoke to them. And the fact that there were so many things to fill a whole bingo board that spoke to them was amazing.
Yeah, man. And I will ask, how do you sort of differentiate for students at different ability levels? And I mean, you guys have covered all your bases here. This is amazing. And you've got buy-in from different teachers and different schools, and you are pulling this all together. This is just absolutely amazing. Wow. You all really just knocked it out of the park here. This is incredible. Boy.
I mean, service connects to every subject. I think social studies was an easy in.
Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense that you're pairing those together. And so as you're seeing the students come through, what did you see? What were their reactions as they're coming through this museum?
So one thing I think I want to notice is just the joy that I saw. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Monisha, but these students were not doing this for a grade. This was not part of the curriculum. They were not being assessed in any way. There was no reason for them to care. There was no you know what I mean? No extrinsic motivation for them to pretend to care. So I had really low expectations of, what to expect, what to ask of eighth grade students who are coming to a museum they had never heard of, designed by students they may have never met, with an adult, me, who I am nothing special. And so I was like, oh boy, I just hope they have fun. Thanks, Monisha. So when I saw them come in, and first, their faces lit up when they saw a photograph of a person they recognized, or because my students are geniuses, they chose images of soccer as a form of service, soccer leadership, or they chose a packet of ramen that they knew would catch students' attention to symbolize our food pantry. They chose stuff that they knew, would be relevant to students and would also pique their curiosity. So anyway, that next step was just young people finding objects or exhibits that actually were interesting to them, and maybe picking up the gloves and trying them on and high-fiving their friend, or, trying to grab the soccer ball and throw it. We had to end up buying that is the one object that I learned. We bought a box to put it in, a display box, because I was like, okay, that's too far. We want them to touch it, but maybe not throw it.
I was going to say, if you remember correctly, we did not actually put the ball on display at Key. We had the jersey, we had the gloves. I was like, we're not putting the ball out there.
Another design. Know your audience.
But yeah, but that joy and that engagement was really rewarding. But then there's always that point after the initial 5 minutes where there's kind of a lull, and people are, some people are, there's freedom in a museum, right? So some people are no longer thinking about service, and that is their right. But others are completing that graphic organizer. And so I'm looking over their shoulders to see. One of the things that really surprised me and inspired me, Monisha, was one of the questions on the graphic organizer was, who inspires you to serve? And a lot of the students wrote Lewis High School students. So the Key Middle School students are citing their older peers at Lewis as examples of being a change maker. And to me, that's really the point of this museum. I think we live pretty close to DC. So there is this idea that if you want to go to an important cultural institution and learn something that matters, maybe we have to get a school bus and go into DC. And, our museums in DC are amazing, but just the idea that our community is worthy of preservation and study and celebration. And our students can be the agents of change that are inspiring others.
Yes.
That's what this museum is doing. And I think, that was to me what was the most beautiful about watching it in action at Key Middle School.
And we didn't give them a ton of setup to this. They walked in, had them pick up their graphic organizer. There was put a little display of books about change makers and sort of civil rights activists. And then we had them come in, and I was like, so guys, this is a museum that was created by Lewis High School students about our community. And I told them that the graphic organizer's audience was just myself and the students who created the museum. So the fact that they all filled it out, it's kind of a win.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome. Huh. And you said that as it travels, it's meant to collect more stories. And you alluded to the fact that the middle school students added their own pieces to this. And so I'm kind of curious, what did that look like? How did that what was the process there?
Sure. So one, that graphic organizer, tabulating that data, created a graph. Deborah turned it into this amazing infographic that you can find on the website for the Lewis Leadership Program Museum of Service. So that was one piece, data. Another piece, Key Center created their trifold to honor Judy Heumann. On a more granular level, we had these hearts that I posted on a whiteboard. And as classes moved through, we asked students to fill out a heart if they wanted to that said, service means to me, or what does service mean to me, right? So complete that. And they would put that on a heart, and I would post it on there. And we got so many hearts.
Wow.
And some of them had these really profound things. Some of them were serving for my fans, right? I can't think of a more middle school thing than
I love that one.
So there's a range. And then we also contributed 2 more honorees.
Wow.
When we were talking about this 11 by 17 panels.
Yeah.
Both of them have been teachers at Key. One of them is retired, but she continues to serve our community through Food for Neighbors, which helps address hunger in our community and access to food. And the other one is one of our amazing math teachers who has been at Key for over 20 years. And she is so invested in our students' lives. She keeps in touch with them well after they leave Key. She is there for them in so many ways, right? Kids having trouble seeing the board in her class, she makes sure they have glasses. She goes the extra mile to make sure that kids can learn, and they know it, and they come back and they talk to her and they see her and they keep in touch.
That's awesome. We're talking about this service museum, and despite 25 years in education, it literally did not occur to me, oh yeah, teachers should go in there. And your students are there. They're on it. They've got it going on. So good. So awesome. And a testament to the students, but also a testament to your staff that they are eliciting this reaction from the students. That's awesome.
So yes, shout out to Nancy Batchelder and Marcy Dietrich.
Amazing. Wow. Love it. The middle school students are contributed. And then what was sort of the high schoolers' response or reaction to these new pieces?
Yeah. So what I got to come back to my school with was this bag of like hearts and graphic organizers. And like, I mean, I just, it was like coming home, with like Santa with a bag over my shoulder. So we, back in my classroom, we sorted through all of this and we really try to think about, well, what do we do with this? How do we display it in a way that is portable and engaging? And so our students took the hearts and made a sort of poster mural kind of thing on a trifold with some interpretive text that tells the story of where the hearts came from and prompts visitors to add their own. So it continues to grow. And so the museum since then has been to one of our elementary schools. It's going to another one on Monday. And it's also John Lewis's birthday in February. February 21st is his birthday, but every year we celebrate as a community, set up our service museum. And actually the activist, Dolores Huerta, the civil rights leader, came as a guest speaker that day and visited our service museum and got to see all of the different ideas from Monisha's students and my students that they had contributed there. So that was like just an incredible honor. As the museum travels, you'll see on our website, the student curator of our website, her name's Chloe. Shout out to Chloe, 9th grade student leader. She called this tab the Museum on the Move. So that is our blog, and you'll see all the different stories of, where our museum goes. Yeah, so the work that the Key Middle School students contributed didn't only yield this display that now is an interactive to solicit additional community input, but it also gave my students the idea of, in addition to hearts, they added the hand. So there are these cutouts. You can cut out a heart and share what service means to you, or you could cut out a hand and write or draw one way that you want to be of service, one way that you want to do the work, right? So now we've got like multiple interactives. So yeah, like I feel like everybody just with their individual creativity continues to add to make this museum better.
Man, this is just, every time I think my mind has been blown as much as it can be blown, you add more amazingness to it. So this is so great. So, wow. So now this was the first year that you guys had the library. Did this all happen this year? Like everything?
Right. So yes, so the students got the idea in the fall, like September. I forgot to mention this, but it was a really cool step. Once they knew they wanted to gather our community stories of service, our local retirement home, Green Spring Senior Living Center, they sent a busload of elders to come to our school. They paired up with our students, and our students did two-way interviews about what service means to you and what perspectives you have on our community's needs and strengths. And so there were these intergenerational deep conversations about service. And then together they made this like beautiful banner kind of commemorating some of the ideas that came out of the conversation. And that banner is now part of our service museum. And what we're trying to inspire there is just, service connects us, right? And so how can we use this idea of small or big actions as a way to connect individuals in our community who maybe wouldn't have the chance to meaningfully, know each other otherwise. So yeah, like lots of really cool stuff. November was when we debuted the idea of the service museum. Our students had built one panel in English, one panel in Spanish, and we unveiled our first 10 honorees and announced our plans. And then since November, the museum has been kind of traveling and growing, with its first stop being Key Middle School right after winter break.
That is amazing. Wow. Okay, man. I mean, it's just hard to wrap my mind around the fact that this has all happened in this amount of time. Like, this seems like a multi-school year. Like this seems like something a sophomore freshman would start, and then now they are a senior and we're actually getting to the implementation phase. So this is amazing that they have pulled this all together so fast and so wonderfully too. Like, this is not some fly by night. Like I said before, I'm going to say again, the images that you guys posted look like they came straight out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art museums. Like, this stuff is like high quality. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is really great. So, okay. So do you have plans for the future? Where does this go? Especially since your sort of instigator, your lead good troublemaker, is a senior. What then happens?
I like lead good troublemaker.
I was going to say, I feel like you need to make sure that Shania knows that she is the lead good troublemaker.
Really good. Well, one really exciting thing is that we had a significant private donation inspired by the service museum. of $1,700.
Wow.
And as a result, we were asking our students kind of what do we want to do with it? We don't come across that kind of funding usually. But our students decided to work with our Educate Fairfax is a nonprofit that supports Fairfax County Public Schools. Our students worked with Educate Fairfax to set up a service grant program for students. So right now on our website, students at Lewis High School can apply for up to $200 grants to do a service project that positively impacts our community. So one of our plans for our service museum, we don't just want to celebrate service that has already happened. We think that's really important. But the main reason that we want to celebrate service is to inspire young people to get involved in service. So we are hoping that service grant program grows over time. It is going to be administered by our students with staff oversight. So the students in the Lewis Leadership Program who've done service projects already are going to be helping to decide which projects to fund and then mentor those students, whether we'd love to grow it to our elementary and middle and high schools in the pyramid, or even in the region.
That's amazing. This is
that's so cool.
Great news. I'm learning this now along with you guys, and this is amazing.
So, it's kind of breaking news.
That's
This is
awesome.
very recent. What we really want is for our museum to be a platform for our students to share about the changes they hope to see, their own power to create change, and to share their wisdom, their support, their resources to help other young people get involved.
I mean, mentorship is leadership. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the idea that the program has now cultivated these skills in students to where they're ready to pass it on. That's
so true.
Well, and I'm kind of curious, Monisha, if you'd gotten any feedback from the students or the staff, because the staff are, bringing the kids in. I'm sure that they had a chance to check this out. And I'm just kind of curious if they had any, what kind of feedback or thoughts they may have shared with you.
From the staff, it was, our kids did this? I was like, yeah.
That's awesome.
They might be alumni, but our kids did this. So it was surprise. It was pride. It was, all of those things that as an educator, you go, yeah, our kids.
Yeah.
Right. From the students, they remembered it. So for example, our students in English class in 8th grade have to do a research project on justice. And when students were having a hard time coming up with a topic, I brought up that graph that I made of, hey, guys, when I saw you guys in January with the museum, here's what you guys told me were the issues most important to our community. And by and large, these are justice issues, right? Like we're talking about housing insecurity and hunger and safety, and these are justice issues. So they remembered that.
I love
experience.
I love when we can help them see that their individual subjects are not individual subjects, that it's all connected, it's all tied together, and it's all part of your life. And so you're really making that a very concrete moment for them. That's great. Boy, wow. Again, my brain just overloaded with the amazingness that is happening with all of these things. Oh, boy. So if people were thinking about looking at doing this or, approaching this, I don't know if folks are going to have the same kinds of supports that it sounds like you have to make a program like this fly. But I have no doubt people are going to be very interested in trying to figure out some ways that they can bring even parts of this to their spaces, to their students, because this is just an incredible learning experience and just life experience for them. So any tips, suggestions, things that people might want to, have front of mind if they're looking to kind of move in this direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So our students have been publishing all of the templates that they've made on our website. And so I know some aspects of what we are doing might feel big and ambitious. And that's because our students are amazing and the best students in the whole world. And so the idea that it's traveling to other schools and like community partners are coming, those are big and those are important and beautiful. But I think at its heart, this project was really about students using the tools available to them to tell stories that matter to them about like how possible and accessible it is to be a servant leader in our community. And so the templates we have on the website, they are very basic with sentence starters in Spanish and English, inviting students to highlight a person, a group who showcases our community's strengths, or to gather perspectives that showcase our community's needs to inspire people to figure out how to serve an authentic need in our community. This can be done on, with a black and white printer and maybe a piece of cardboard or a trifold. A lot of the exhibits our students began creating before we started getting fancy with it were on very simple trifolds with, graphics that we cut out and pasted on. And then we found out Monisha had a laminator and we went wild over there. But it was nothing that required, a budget beyond if you are able to access the school printer. And I would just say also that like Canva, if that is a tool that is available to you, that's a tool for me. Our school district is lucky enough to offer a free account to teachers. But like as somebody who does not have any professional design skills, it is a very easily used tool to help what's in students' minds, be visualized in a way that I think reflects like the professional quality that those ideas deserve, but that I, as a, humanities major, don't necessarily have the skills to provide. And so like, there are tools out there, I guess is what I'm saying, that really can be a small but powerful elevation. But I think, again, if I were talking to people out there who think this is a cool idea, but maybe are getting overwhelmed by some of the bigger aspects of it, at its heart, giving students the tools and the power to tell one simple story of a change maker or someone who is involved in service in our community. And, I think I just want to read from Key Middle School, like their data graphic, right? It says, who inspires us to serve? These are quotes from students after visiting the Lewis Leadership Program Museum. They wrote things like this: who inspires us to serve? Students who inspire others by fighting for a better change are the people who inspire me. My grandfather, he builds homes for the homeless. He also builds schools and places of God. I try to be like him every day. My mom, because she is a super supportive and nice person and likes helping people around her. My dad, he wants me to do good in the world. Looking at the projects in the museum inspired me to help my community. These are just a few examples of things that 7th and 8th graders wrote, but I guess I just mean everyone has a story of somebody in their life who has made a positive difference. And I think, creating space for students to celebrate that somehow and to share that with someone else, I think it gives students a chance to showcase something that matters to them, but it also gives our school community a chance to connect over something meaningful.
There's so much power in telling this story of your own community. I know that Deborah and Trinaya and the other students who were involved in the creation of the Lewis Leadership Museum of Service did not envision this traveling outside of our community, but I think that there's value in that too.
Absolutely.
So if you want to host their museum, our museum, reach out.
Well, that was something I was kind of curious about. Like, it's because you got this awesome thing going in district in-house, and I'm curious, like, I can see this in the future definitely doing some distance traveling instead of just some down the block traveling.
I love that. That is
audience.
definitely an ambition. I'm really proud and excited to share that the National Service Symposium has invited our student leaders and our museum to be present at their symposium in DC in April. So if you are coming to the National Service Symposium, you should definitely come and stop by and say hi to our students and see our service museum. And I think you're right that, I guess for all the educators listening, first, I want to connect with you and learn all the ways that you support students. But I do think, I guess so many things that are hard to predict become possible when we listen to students and support them in creating the ideas that just start in their mind. And if they're lucky enough to have an adult like Monisha in their life who will listen and take it seriously and help them walk through the process of figuring out what's practical, they can take that next step. And I feel like that's all we've been doing with this museum is just taking that next step and seeing what happens next. So I don't know what will happen in the future, but I do know that our students have really created a legacy already of what a large scale student-led project can mean beyond the school walls.
Boy, just so much power, so much amazing work that is being done by your students, and that you guys are facilitating this and helping them figure out how they can be those leaders, because we need them. We need these leaders. And it is amazing that they are, even at the high school and the middle school level, taking those steps and looking to where they can be those kinds of helpers. Because, man, we could use more helpers these days. So that's amazing. Wow. We could probably talk about this for another 4 hours, but I am going to say that I think we're at the point where we're going to take our 90-degree turn and go into our book break.
Book break. Squiddy!
anything you want to share, any kind of book you want to get on folks' radar, personal, professional, staff, students, yourself, doesn't matter, whatever. Anything that just kind of caught your eye. What do you want people to have on their reading radars?
Do you want me to go first as
Of course, you're the expert.
librarian? Okay, so it's hard for me to ever narrow it down to one book. So I picked two. It's
Great.
progress, right? So for anybody who has heard of my name before, it was probably in relation to middle grade literature, because that's kind of my avenue. So middle grade literature, Extraordinary Orbit of Alex Ramirez. It's this lovely novel in verse. I finished it in a day and immediately recommended it to 5 people. It's about this student who is in a sheltered, self-contained special education setting who dreams of working for NASA someday. And he is struggling with moving into a general education setting, not because of the workload, but because he wants his parents to trust that he can do the work. He wants his teachers to be able to trust that he can do the work. And he wants his friends that he has made in this sheltered setting to not think that he doesn't still see them as their peers. And it's beautifully written. It's heartbreaking. And it is so true to middle school mindsets of that social anxiety, this push and pull of growth, and what's next.
Man, that sounds awesome. I've never even heard this title before. This is definitely going on my short list. I love this.
Nice.
Okay, great.
Okay.
You got
My
more.
next one
Good.
is a
Yeah.
adult nonfiction. It's called Why We Click. It was released earlier this year. And it's the science of vibes. And it was really thought provoking. I was really into it. Like, why is it that we vibe with some people? Like, Deborah and I are on the same vibe.
Yes.
All the time. So why is that? And why are there people who we don't?
Interesting. Okay. That's based on the title. I thought we were going to be talking about like why we are on our computers clicking on things. And so this is a very different direction. Okay. I like this. All right. Awesome. 2 great titles going right on my list. Awesomeness.
Nice.
Thank you. Deborah, you got something you want to share?
Yeah. Oh, I'm taking notes. Thank you, Monisha. So I have two too. I'm going to do 2.
Yeah.
So the first, it's a biography. Ella Baker is one of my heroes. And so Barbara Ransby, the historian, has an incredible biography of Ella Baker, whose lifetime spans, multiple generations. And really, she mentored and supported multiple generations of activists and change makers. But I feel like it's a story about leadership that we don't always see in the dominant narratives of our nation and world's history, the kind of leadership that really believes in the power of ordinary people to shape our institutions, and the kind of leadership that does not always have to be out front, being a charismatic leader of a movement, telling people what to do, but really is much more about listening and empowering others. And so it's definitely the kind of leader I want to be. And I feel like I turn to biographies often when I am trying to find models of the kind of person I aspire to be one day, and trying to find evidence that certain things have happened before, so they are possible in the future. And so Ella Baker, really offers me a vision of the kind of leaders that I think we deserve. And then this is, I don't know if it's a more unique one, but there's a writer named Maria Popova. Do you know her from like Brain Pickings?
Don't.
Well, she has, I don't know if you can call it a book, but it's called Bird Divinations.
Okay.
So it's a deck of cards.
I was going to say, I wouldn't call this a book, but you showed me this.
I'm like obsessed with it. So it's a deck of cards that uses illustrations, ornithological illustrations of birds, and she writes a poem on each one. And you're sort of supposed to pick one at random. And I'm not sure how to explain it, but it's this writer is always at the intersection of science and poetry in trying to push our thinking about what is possible and what it means to be human. And so this combination for me of like ornithology and like, I'm not sure, divination and inspiration. It's definitely my morning coffee. Yeah, it's like my morning coffee routine of like pulling a card and seeing what poem I got and looking at a bird.
Nothing wrong with that. Great to start the day with a bird. Man. Well, You guys have just shared so much. I truly appreciate you taking the time and being willing to share the details of this amazing program that you have got going on here, because this is just so, so wonderful. I know people are going to want to find you. They're going to want to see what you got going on. Where should they go looking for you online?
You can find the Lewis Leadership Program Museum of Service online. It is Lewis Leadership Program Museum of Service.org. And you'll find all of the photos of our students' work, all the Canva templates, and all of the blog posts that really chronicle the travels of this museum. And there's also an email address on that site, so you can sign up to get newsletters.
Get the newsletters, folks. You want to.
As for me, I am probably too online, but it's all personal, not professional. So if you want musings of a school librarian, I'm at Monisha Blair on all platforms that I'm on.
I'll tell you, Blue Sky, I am so glad that I ran across your post, because so great, man.
You're the reason I'm on Blue Sky.
Awesome. I love that. I love hearing that.
Invites back when it was an invite only.
Yes. That was back in the day. I mean, when our primary platform kind of imploded, we needed some place to go. And I feel like Blue Sky kind of has the general features that we're looking for. But great place to be. If you're not there, folks, head on over. But wherever you're at, make sure you're checking these two out, because holy smokes, obviously, they know what they're doing here. This is just awesomeness. So again, thank you so much for taking the time and for coming to share this, because this is just so, so great. Huge kudos to your students for putting this together. Huge kudos to you for making this work, because this is just so, so good.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you
you.
for this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for the episode. They feature links to resources shared by our guest, as well as ways to keep in touch with them, and links to the book break titles. I'd love to hear from you. If you have feedback, a comment, an idea, a question, or something you want to share, you can email drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. Know a librarian with something we could learn from? Let us know. Until next time, be good, be safe, and be well.